On this episode of Breaking Grad, we're asking the question, what is a communications professional? What does a communications professional do?
Okay, I guess they deal with, actually I don't really know.
What does a communications professional do?
I'm not really sure. They work with people. That's the most I know.
What does a communications professional do?
What? A communications professional, they help organizations develop competent communication in the organizations that they're in. They seek to, I have no idea.
Well, you kind of have two different approaches to people who are professional communicators. On the one hand, you have the folks who get jobs in the communication professions, like journalists, people in broadcasting, public relations. But on the other hand, you have people that learn communication from a liberal arts perspective. And what those folks are interested in is the skills that they're acquiring are related to quality of mind, communication skills, and effectiveness that can be applied to a lot of kinds of jobs: human resources, management, law school, medicine, and any number of professions.
What does a communications professional do?
I'm not sure exactly.
Oh, I actually know this. A communications professional is basically revolved around like telecommunications and broadcasting and basic stuff.
What does a communications professional do?
They communicate with people.
I feel like that's someone who would kind of maybe go into a broadcasting area, because I don't know. Can we start over?
What I really wanted to do was to really focus on how people related and connected to one another. So I got really interested in issues about how you persuade people, issues about how people communicate in teams and groups and relationships. So that's how I really began to get interested in this process we call communication. There is overlap, I think, with other disciplines like business and sociology and psychology. But what makes communication different is the focus on messages. We focus on what people actually say and do with one another. You know, there used to be a saying that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. It's the biggest load of crap that's ever been perpetuated on people. Words do matter because words construct our understandings, they construct our societies, they construct our relationships, and they construct our identities. So communication is different because it does focus on messages.
Hello YouTube, my name is Marlia Dean and I'm a graduate student in the Department of Communication at Texas A&M University.
Hi Marlia, thanks for sitting down with me today. So people who are not in the communications field as a professional or as a student might have some idea about what that means, but what does it mean to you?
So for me, a professional in communication is someone who focuses on how people use messages in order to make meanings. But that could be across a variety of different contexts. So for me personally, that's healthcare. But it doesn't have to be healthcare. It could also be different types of forms of media, channels of communication, as well as different types of cultures.
So why did you choose communication and what about it fascinates you?
So I chose a degree in communication specifically because communication is the way in which our world functions. It's the key, right? I mean, you know the common saying, we cannot not communicate. And I think that's what a degree in communication tries to get across, is why do we use messages, how do we use messages, and how do we make meaning with those messages? I study health communication, the ways in which individuals, so that could be patients, physicians, nurses, health educators, how they seek, share, and process health communication information and experiences. Now, more specifically, I'm interested in patients and clinicians' encounters and relationships within the context of cancer. For example, did you hear that actress and director Angelina Jolie recently underwent a preventative double mastectomy in order to reduce her risk for breast cancer? Well, this is one of the things that I'm interested in. Angelina is a previvor, someone who's highly predisposed to breast and ovarian cancer due to a genetic mutation called breast cancer 1 or BRCA1 and breast cancer 2, BRCA2. But it's commonly known as the breast cancer gene. So in Angelina's case, this was a preventative double mastectomy that she underwent, meaning that in her natural breast she didn't have any cancerous tissues, but decided to still remove her breasts in order to reduce her risk for breast cancer.
So we've talked about communication as messages. Now, how do messages relate to healthcare?
So within the context of healthcare specifically, effective patient-clinician communication has the potential to impact both directly and indirectly patient health outcomes. So for example, if a patient and a clinician can't understand each other, the messages that are being communicated back and forth, ultimately that patient's health can't be improved. And even more importantly, that patient's well-being can't be improved too. And that's something that we need to consider as well.
So there's a common saying in psychology, research is me-search. So we've talked about messages and we've talked about healthcare, but what about your experiences specifically drew you in to do healthcare research and communication?
So that's a really good question. So I'm interested in health communication research because my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer from a very young age. Breast cancer is rampant in my family. Not only has my mom had cancer, but also my mom's younger sister, my grandmother, my grandma's sister, my paternal great-grandmother, and even on my dad's side, my dad's sister have fought breast cancer. So I'm especially passionate about health communication research because I recently tested positive for the BRCA2 gene, the breast cancer 2 gene that I was talking about earlier. For example, Angelina Jolie, she has BRCA1, I have BRCA2. And I'm really interested in how previvors manage that anxiety and fear about having a possible cancer diagnosis in the future.
So how do you do this research with previvors? How do you learn about their experiences to help them?
So I'll be interviewing previvors specifically to learn about specific strategies they can engage in order to manage the anxiety and the fear about having a possible cancer diagnosis in the future. And then ultimately learn how they can actually protect their bodies and thus live longer and happy lives.
Do you have any advice for students or even incoming undergraduates or graduate students?
Yeah, sure. So for students in general, I would say to figure out what you're passionate about and what you're interested in. And then talk to people you know who know you really well. So parents, family members, teachers, and ask them what strengths you possess. And then you can combine those two things, what you're passionate about and the strengths that you possess in order to come up with a career that fits you well.
So YouTube, what do you think a communications professional does? Put your comments below.
Wonderful stream of consciousness.
Yes, exactly.
You want to high five?
With the left or the right?
How about high 10?
Woo!
Change the world!